Hi, I'm Charles, and you're watching The State of the Republic.
This week started off with the UN General Assembly meeting in New York City. On Tuesday, Trump gave a characteristically stupid and provocative speech. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly was very, very happy. Trump has been furiously denouncing both North Korea and Iran at the expense of constructive dialogue that might actually fix the problems at issue. With North Korea, Trump continued to personally attack Kim Jong-un, calling him Rocket Man, and threatening to wipe out the entire country, and slapping them with even more sanctions. With Iran, Trump is still trying to destroy the nuclear agreement, despite certification from the State Department, the Pentagon, and foreign nations that Iran is in compliance with the agreement. In response, both Iran and North Korea denounced the Trump administration's warmongering efforts. The next day, Trump gave a speech to African leaders in which he made up the country of Namibia and then proceeded to praise his friends who was going to Africa to get rich, presumably by once again exploiting African resources and people like in the colonial days. The other major piece of executive branch agency news was more revelations about insider trading suspect and HHS Secretary Tom Price's particular travel habits. Price was revealed to have taken over 20 private charter aircraft for at least $300,000 at taxpayer expense. Price's office justified this on the grounds of scheduling issues and traveling to areas hit by hurricanes, both of which were rather quickly proven to be wrong. Price is now under investigation by the HHS Inspector General for his waste of taxpayer dollars, and he is not alone. Rich asshole Steve Mnuchin and oil man puppet Scott Pruitt are also under investigation for their misuse of government-funded travel. Meanwhile, the Alabama special Senate election is continuing, with the Republican primary runoff almost here. The two candidates in the Republican runoff are the corrupt incumbent appointee Luther Strange and the leader of the Christian Taliban's Alabama chapter, Roy Moore. Strange is widely suspected of receiving the appointment in a deal not to actively prosecute Alabama Governor Robert Bentley, who has since resigned in disgrace after revelations about a sex scandal and who has pleaded guilty to misdemeanor charges related to the misuse of campaign funds. Moore, of course, was kicked off the Alabama Supreme Court twice after a failure to abide by federal court rulings on removing a Ten Commandments monument from a courthouse and on legalizing gay marriage. Moore is a birther and suggested that 9/11 was punishment for America for turning away from God. Moore is backed by much of the far right, including chair of the House Koch brothers Freedom Caucus, Mark Meadows, Nazi saluter Laura Ingraham, the meth-fueled Quitta from Wazilla, Sarah Palin, Louis Caribou Sex Gohmert, Iowa Strom Thurmond Steve King, Hungarian Nazi Sebastian Gorka, and psoriasis ulcer Stephen Bannon. Meanwhile, Strange is endorsed by our glorious pumpkin Führer Donald Trump, hyper-Christian marshmallow Mike Pence, and Senate Majority Turtle Mitch McConnell, a veritable who's who of the most odious people in America. The two candidates debated this week and spent their time trying to outdo each other in glomming onto Trump. Establishment Republican groups have spent heavily to boost Strange and tear down Moore, with McConnell's Senate Leadership Fund alone spending millions of dollars. Most public polling has Moore ahead by a substantial margin, but private polling from Strange and his affiliated groups say the race is closer. Gohmert, Palin, and Gorka have held a rally for Moore, while Trump held a rally for Strange. Trump took the opportunity to blast John McCain on healthcare, calling for locking up Hillary Clinton for the millionth time, and attacking NFL players who didn't stand for the national anthem. Trump then continued the attacks on the NFL and black athletes in general on Saturday morning. If you want a better class of representation, support Democrat Doug Jones in his effort to be elected to that same Senate seat. Jones was a staffer to Alabama Senator Howell Heflin, was responsible for prosecuting those responsible for the 1963 Birmingham church bombing, and has been endorsed by John Lewis and Joe Biden, a much better candidate for the people of Alabama. The Russia scandal also continued to unfold this week. Trump's lawyers in the Russia scandal seem to be turning on each other. Trump lawyer Ty Cobb was overheard at a D.C. restaurant ranting about White House counsel Don McGahn. Cobb and McGahn have been pursuing different strategies to try to deal with the Russia probe, with Cobb advocating for cooperating fully and getting it over with quickly, while McGahn taking a much more conservative approach. After the story broke, McGahn took Cobb's head off over it and even got John Kelly to reprimand Cobb for speaking about such things in public. In other lawyer news, the RNC Legal Defense Fund was revealed to be paying for Trump's attorneys in the Russia scandal, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. A Russian-affiliated billionaire has been donating heavily to the RNC Legal Defense Fund recently, but that couldn't possibly have any connection, right? Meanwhile, former Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort continued to have more and more dumped on him, with this week seeing a veritable cornucopia of new revelations. Reports now indicate that Mueller's prosecutors told Manafort that they were going to indict him during the search of his house. It was also revealed that U.S. investigators sought and obtained a FISA court warrant to wiretap Paul Manafort's communications. The content of all of Manafort's communications, including those with Trump, are probably now sitting in the mounting pile of evidence at Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office. Right-wingers have ridiculously claimed that this somehow validates Trump's claims that Obama wiretapped him. This is patently false. Trump himself was not wiretapped under these warrants. Manafort was. If you communicate with someone who is being wiretapped, those conversations will be recorded, but it does not mean that you yourself are under surveillance. Manafort was also revealed this week to have offered private briefings on the campaign to his benefactor, Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska, who is very close to Vladimir Putin. Such offers were communicated through Manafort's official campaign email account, which would indicate that he had no concern about Trump finding out about these contacts. Trump this week stayed briefly at his golf resort in Bedminster, New Jersey, around the same time that a plane owned by that same Russian oligarch that Paul Manafort was communicating with landed in Newark as well. Manafort seems to have stacked up a large pile of legal bills in this case and has since taken on new clients in the form of the Kurdish government in Iraq. Manafort is now working to help the Kurdish government's proposed referendum on independence, a position directly at odds with the official U.S. position against the referendum. Manafort is also reportedly considering leaving the country to go to Iraq to help with the referendum. Fleeing the country after a prosecutor says they are going to indict you definitely does not look guilty at all. Another Trump associate, Trump lawyer Michael Cohen, was originally slated to testify this week in a closed session before the Senate Intelligence Committee. However, Cohen sank his testimony by violating the agreed-upon terms and releasing a public statement declaring his innocence right before the testimony. In retaliation, the committee canceled his testimony and is now planning to subpoena him to testify in a public hearing. Congressional committees received more evidence in the scandal this week, with Facebook finally agreeing to turn over copies of 3,000 political advertisements paid for by Russian-linked accounts, and the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network turned over records related to the Trump Taj Mahal's money laundering violations. This week also saw massive records requests from Mueller to the White House, with Mueller demanding phone records and documents related not only to possible campaign collusion and cover-ups, but also information on Trump's actions in office that could indicate being compromised by a foreign power. Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer may soon become the centerpiece of this investigation, as revelations this week saw Spicer attending many White House meetings and taking copious notes on them. All of this has led to an increasingly paranoid Trump White House, with staffers suspecting each other of wearing a wire for Mueller. Of course, the biggest piece of news this week was continued Republican efforts to destroy health care for millions of people. The Republicans are about to run out of time to destroy health care, as the reconciliation rules that allow them to pass the bill with a simple majority will expire at the end of the fiscal year, the end of September. The last-ditch Graham-Cassidy bill would destroy the Medicaid expansion and massively cut the program in the future, and would allow states to not guarantee health care protections. The Republicans continue to show a remarkable lack of understanding about the legislation and health care in general. Graham-Cassidy has been blasted by politicians in both parties, and pretty much every group even somewhat related to the medical field, including nurses' unions, the American Medical Association, the insurance industry, a plethora of patient advocacy groups, Republican governors in multiple states, and Medicaid directors in all 50 states. Comedian Jimmy Kimmel also took the Republicans to task for the legislation, focusing especially on Senator Bill Cassidy, and stating that Cassidy lied to his face. In an effort to pressure Republicans to vote for this new and even worse bill, Senator Lamar Alexander dropped his original plan for a bipartisan health care fix with Senator Patty Murray. The bill is already on life support, with both Senators Rand Paul and John McCain saying that they will vote no on the legislation. Senator Susan Collins is already leaning towards no, and Lisa Murkowski is undecided. The Republican leadership is attempting to bribe Murkowski by essentially exempting her state from the effects of the legislation, allowing Alaska to keep the ACA and the attendant Medicaid expansion. It should say a lot about the Republican healthcare plan that the way that they're trying to get people to vote for it is to offer them immunity from the bill's consequences. Only 3 senators need to vote no to defeat this legislation, and McCain's statement seems to many to sound the death knell for this bill. However, we must continue to speak out against this bill until the end of the month, as we cannot be completely sure that it is dead until then. That does it for this week's news.
Thank you for watching the program. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting content.